brands focused on marketplaces. It doesn't have to be on Amazon, but it can be across marketplaces. But right now we are focused on Amazon. Slide, please, Emmett. So this slide, I think, says 1,000 words. You can see the trend of multiples over the last couple of years. Over the last year or so, let's say in 2021, multiples were high, let's say. It was a pretty boom market for sellers. Now, moving through 2022, conditions, quite frankly, have become a lot more challenging. Central banks are tapering. We have increasingly high inflation rates. Now, interest rates are getting to, well, for the first decades or so, we've seen the first rate hikes across the world, basically. And that means that funding has become an issue on both the sellers as well as the OSAM side. So by that, I mean the rising interest rates means that the higher cost of capital, meaning that the free cash flow that the brands that we acquire has to cover the rates that we also have to pay. Now, as we move into more of a consumer-led, let's say, headwinds on revenues, that means that the valuations that we pay on the upfront have become depressed. Now, that we can see that in Q3 2022, multiples have come to around 2020 levels. Now, if you go to the next slide, Emmett. But that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that the valuation that sellers get is going to be depressed in the long term. What that really means is that you might take a lower cash up front that you may have got in 2021, but that also means that there's a lot more opportunity for you to receive the full valuation that these sellers deserve across a longer time horizon. What that really means is that you should embrace the future payments. So what that really means is are there earnouts? Are there deferred? Are there contingent payments? Are there any various ways of paying the seller for the value down the road? And that means maximizing the value across the long term, across, let's say, 4 or 5 years rather than today. That means that rather than getting a 2 to 3.5 times upfront, you could be really achieving 4.5, 7.5 times across the lifetime of the brand. Next slide, Emmett. So where does that fit within an acquirer's, let's say, mandate? So I'm sure all of our panelists here, so Sean, Kenneth, Thomas, Eric, you will have different criteria. But that really boils down to what the right acquirer means. So for us, we are very category focused across the left-hand side, which is home, baby, pet, sports, and personal care. Now, we move into an environment where, to maximize valuation, the brand has to be very focused. And we've built a platform here where we can plug and play brands across our entire portfolio relatively easily, as long as the supply chain, as long as the operations are, as long as the number of complexity that the brand brings is relatively under control. And we've built a category focus across these 5 verticals. Now, for the products and brands that maximize value for us and acquire for the brands that we acquire, that really means brand equity. Now, what does that mean in practice? Is there a brand identity? So is a portfolio of products that the brand has, are they coherent? Are they all within one vertical, or are they a collection of hodgepodge of products across a whole wide array of categories? Does a brand have IP? Does it have protection? Does it have patents? Does it have some kind of defensibility? What that means is that can we enforce that across the marketplace, meaning that we become the go-to brand for, let's say, buckets, or for outdoor equipment, for tableware, for pet supplies. That just means that we have a lot more defensibility for the brand so that we can, at the end of the day, create brand equity. Now, the second and third verticals are relatively similar to some of our other acquirers out there, but what's the consumer perception of the brand? What are Amazon fundamentals? Where does the product rank? And what are the growth levers out there? So can we launch the product into new markets? Can we launch it into new channels? Can we launch it into new product launch? New products or new product variations. And what this means that referring to the previous slide, is that you have the cash up front that you receive today, and the earnouts and the deferred payments that you get tomorrow. Now, when we pull all of these growth levers that we have built, we have employed professionals to do that, you as a seller, or the brands as who end up selling to us, get to benefit from all of the levers that we end up pulling. So next slide, Emmett. So just to give you a quick example of one of the brands that we acquired, which is called Pour 5. So this is the original snuffle mat. So they sell, let's say, grazing mats for dogs, which slows down the eating habits of dogs. Now, the brand, when we acquired it, was a bit unloved, but it had a lot of patents. So it had a design patent along basically the design of the mat, as well as utility patents, which are the design of the the noodles, as they say, and the functionality of the mat, which means that we have defensibility both on Amazon as well as a wider retail space. And of course, they have trademarks as well. So for this brand, this fits all of our criteria, which I referenced on the previous slide. And therefore, we value this much higher than we would value a brand which doesn't otherwise have that. Now, our criteria might be different to some of our other partners and competitors out there, but that's why I encourage for sellers is that to maximize your value, you have to find the right partner to maximize overall deal value across the long term and not just today.